I'm going to kind of drag the mood down, potentially, because I'm going to talk about a very alarming subject. So something that I call the homicide timeline. So just that word is quite alarming, isn't it? But I'm going to talk about a piece of research that seems to have become incredibly popular because I think it really helps people understand what dangerous relationships look like and what it's like to be in a dangerous relationship, and being able to track if things are maybe getting a bit too dangerous and maybe, we need to be moving on. Now, all of this research is based on something called coercive control, and I expect that by now everybody would have heard that language, everybody will be quite familiar with it, but it's really new. It's really new. It's only been around for probably since about 2008, 2009. So it's something that even our professionals, even the people who work in areas like safeguarding and homicide and, domestic abuse and stalking, is something that maybe still they're not quite understanding as well. But it's a language that has been decided helps us to understand domestic abuse better than we have in the past. So domestic abuse has always been seen as something that happens spontaneously, happens in the minute, is something that happens as a response to something else. You have an argument and somebody loses their temper, and perhaps that's what happens in domestic abuse. But we couldn't be more wrong. And this is where this piece of research has had so much impact, because this piece of research has shown that actually domestic abuse is about repeated and sequential patterns that happen over and over again. So if we've got patterns and if we've got sequences, we've got a kind of ability to predict. And if we can predict something, we can avoid things, we can get out, we can start thinking about our own safety. So I'm going to talk about what it looks like, so in headlines. So when I look at the media sometimes and they talk about coercive control, I see it described as a kind of a sister offence to violence. So we've got all of these, all of the legislation that helps us with, ABH and GBH and assaults and that kind of thing. But there was always the worry there that, what are we going to do about the non-violent abuse? Because we're far more clued up on that now, that not all abuse has violent assaults. I know, we've got coercive control. That's our sister offence. So now we can prosecute people for coercive control, and we've got the violent offences as well. But that would be to completely misunderstand coercive control. So coercive control actually is trapping someone in a relationship. That's it, the purpose of it, and that is the abuse. It's like a mini hostage situation. And this little picture here, the coercive control umbrella, so coercive control is actually the overarching concept, the overarching pattern, and all of the things that you see underneath the umbrella there, things like violence, financial abuse, stalking, threats, they're all tactics to achieve coercive control. So coercive control is not psychological abuse. Psychological abuse is actually a tactic of coercive control. So once we kind of start to understand that, we can start to understand some of the things that happen in domestic abuse. So 3 questions, okay? 3 questions. If you want to identify if perhaps your relationship, no, I won't say that. If somebody else's relationship that you're worried about a friend, 3 questions you can ask to identify whether that relationship might have coercive control. So the first question is this a pattern? Is this happening, whatever it is, over and over and over again? The second question is this pattern making my friend change their daily routines and activities. So is this pattern making them change the way they dress, or the people that they mix with, or how they behave on social media? If it is, we got our second tick. And then our third question, is someone fearful? Is someone afraid? Now that's a really, really important question, because fear doesn't always look like we think it does. So the fear that all of us recognize and understand is something that we call anyway, immediate fear. So if somebody is, I've got a big baseball bat and they're just about to hit you with it, you will go into immediate fear. Also, shaking, crying, maybe come out punching, you run away, fight, flight, freeze, all of those kinds of things. That's our response, that's our immediate fear. Body can't stay in immediate fear for very long. The second type of fear, which is really, really important in what I'm going to talk about, is called chronic fear. Now, chronic fear is something that builds up over time, and it's about avoiding the consequences of something. So you're frightened of something that might happen in the future, so you behave differently to try and stop that happening. Now, I'm just going to tell you my favourite little story now. Many, many, many years ago, I was a police officer. And I remember my very, very first domestic abuse call. I was out with my sergeant on patrol, and the ambulance service had called us to this house. And they were there with this young woman who was just sitting on a chair, and she was bleeding down the back of her neck. And they told us she'd been hit in the head with a lump hammer. So this was a really nasty assault. And the paramedics were saying to her, "Come on, get in the ambulance, get in the ambulance. We have to x-ray you." Wouldn't go. Just would not get in the ambulance. And I'm looking at my sergeant, he's looking at me, and we're thinking, well, if she won't get in the ambulance, there is no way she's supporting a prosecution. So we kind of just tried to get her in the ambulance as well. No, wouldn't go. Eventually, we had to leave. All four of us, frustrated. And on the way out, I said to my sergeant, "Why won't she get in the ambulance, Sarge?" And he said, "Get used to it, Jane. That's what they're like." Now, my sergeant was the loveliest, kindest, most empathetic man. He did not say that because he was horrible. He said it because that was his experience of domestic abuse. Victims don't behave like normal people. But what I wish I had said to that girl, what I wish I'd known about chronic fear, what I wish I'd known about coercive control, I could have said to her, "What are the consequences for you of getting in the ambulance?" And she might have said to me, "If I get in that ambulance, I get another beating. I'll get accused of causing a drama. I'll get accused of getting somebody into trouble." She might have said that. She might have gone the next day and had her head x-rayed. But she thought it was safer to stay at home and look after a potential fractured skull than it was to get the medical assistance then. That's chronic fear. My sergeant thought it was her behaving abnormally. And I think when we look at it in that perspective where she's thinking, if I get in, things will be worse, it's an entirely logical decision. So, with all that as our backdrop, I'm going to very, very quickly now, whistle-stop tour, take you through this sequence that we absolutely know precedes most domestic or intimate partner homicides. So that's when usually, and it is usually a male killing a female partner. Over 80% it will be female, but women do kill men as well. So it's an 8-stage progression, and I'm going to quickly go through each stage one by one, and they are sequential. So the first stage is before two people have even met. So is this person safe for me to have a relationship with? So we look at their history. What have they done before? Because this is domestic abuse, coercive control, stalking. They're all repeat serial offences. So if somebody's done it before, chances are they're going to do it again. So we want to have a look at somebody's history. We want to look if they've been violent before. We want to look if they've got a criminal record. We want to think about some things like, some of the personality traits, like being really jealous and possessive. Honestly, routine jealousy and possessiveness is something to be avoided. So we've got somebody with these traits, perhaps, who we can say are at stage 1. So stage 2, this is when this person, stage 1, meets somebody who they want to be in a relationship with. So stage 2 is when those two people meet. And what characterizes this particular stage is speed and intensity. So if things are going a little bit too fast, if somebody's trying to get you to commit, if you're moving in too early together, there's an early pregnancy, you're declaring love at in the first couple of days, this is a red flag. This is a red flag with somebody who I would call a stage 1er. So you do not want to be declaring your love for somebody who's been a stalker in the past, okay? You kind of look at your watch and say, okay, I gotta go. Because stage 3 is where, stage 3 is when it starts to get more difficult. Because you remember just now I said coercive control is to trap somebody in a relationship? Stage 3 is the relationship. And you could find yourself at this point trapped in this relationship with this person. Now, these are some of the very high risk markers that might say that you're in a dangerous relationship. So this relationship will be going on and on and on and on. There'll be coercive control, there might be violence, there may be financial abuse and all sorts of other things. It's the next stage that might change things. So stage 4 is what we call the trigger. This is a trigger event. This is when things might become a little bit more dangerous. So trigger event, globally, across the world, we look at trigger events for homicide, and the trigger for intimate partner homicide is separation. And imagine separation, a threat of a separation, but there are others. I've put some others on the slide, but separation is the big one, because coercive control is about trapping and separation is about escaping the entrapment. And that person has been working to trap you in that relationship. They are not going to like it if you're leaving. So then we could go in then to stage 5, which is what we call escalation. And this is where they try to get you back. So they've got a big bag of tactics now. We know what some of the coercive control tactics are, but we might have things as well like begging and crying, which will very, very quickly turn into threats or violence as this person tries absolutely everything to regain the control. Now, the good news is most people exit at stage 5. Most people will exit. They'll go back, circle back to stage 1. Maybe the relationship gets back together and they all circle back to stage 3. We've got 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5 over and over again. The more dangerous thing is if we go on to stage 6. Now, stage 6, homicidal ideation sounds really, really bad, doesn't it? It sounds absolutely awful. And we could call it a change in thinking. And this is where the behaviours might actually start to change. There might be a sudden calm. Things may intensify, but this is the stage that most people do not get to, but some do. Where they start thinking, the way to resolve this situation is in fact a homicide. Yeah, that's not great, is it? So stage 7. Now, stage 7, I was really quite shocked to even realise that stage 7 existed, because this is the planning stage. Now, when we think about intimate partner homicides or wife killing or whatever we want to call it, that's a crime of passion, isn't it? And a crime of passion is a spontaneous response to a provocation. We wouldn't have this stage if that were the case. Now, research from the United States, both concur. Over 80% of cases will have a planning stage. Luckily, most don't get that far. And stage 8 is a homicide, and this can play out in many, many, many different ways. So the thing is, I don't want to hover around stage 8 for too long, so we'll just go to the final slide. And I think that what we need to remember is, even though I'm not the greatest person to have at a dinner party, and I'm really, you know, my conversation kind of stops things dead rather than moving things on, but go with your instincts. Your instincts are your body telling you that something is wrong. Do not second guess your instincts. If you think something's wrong, it probably is. And I hope I haven't scared everybody too much. I think the next talk's probably going to be a lot nicer, but thanks very much for listening to me.